questions, obviously. And I had done a presentation recently for another organization leading from a coach's mindset, and she thought, oh, this is really cool. So we're going to approach our transition conversation today from a coach's mindset and explore, well, what is a coach's mindset, and what are the things that you can do during this time of transition that can help you unlock some of the questions and what's on the next slide for you and what you're exploring in that regard. Sound like a plan? I want this to be conversational, so we have a small enough group to do that. So please jump in, add your antidotes, add your questions as we go along, so we can all get some real good value out of our conversation today. You'll notice I'm not going to bore you with a PowerPoint presentation today, but instead I do have some worksheets that we'll use to kind of guide our presentation and structure our conversation. Also, it's my hope that this kind of serves as a way for you to take the ideas that we're talking about and figuring out how do you mold them into something tangible and actionable as you think about what it is that we're exploring today. So what's everybody have?
Are there two sheets?
There's just one sheet front and back. Yep, one sheet front and back.
Thank you.
Great. Do we all have one?
That one.
Yep. You can just send them back to the front or plop them on the back table, whatever's easiest. So, before we get started, I want to just take a moment to collectively take a few big breaths and center ourselves into this room. Get rid of the hecticness of the Monday morning, get rid of the commute, and just kind of all bring ourselves into this place. So, if you'll Thank you. That will make so. Let's jump in. What do you guys know about coaching? And more specifically, what do you know or think you know about a coach's mindset? What are some qualities that come to mind?
So my older son had a coach when he started college. And somehow, in thinking about that, the prompt was lots of questions. What questions can you ask to motivate you?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely right.
It's kind of like a very optimistic, positive, future-driven mindset.
Yeah, able to see the positive in things. What else?
Help you come to your own solutions of whatever's challenging you and figuring it out.
Excellent. So I'm done here. You guys have hit the nail on the head in all three regards. Anybody else like to add anything?
Well, three things I could think of is be able to figure out where you need to get to,
Yes.
where you are now, and the best way to get from one to the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You'll notice there's a place on your worksheet to jot down your thoughts as we work through this. But you guys have absolutely hit the nail on the head. Coaches ask questions. We see the opportunities. We help our clients plot a way forward. And but the one quality that we're going to really explore today that we didn't hit on is the idea of coaches are fully present. We are taught in training how to bring ourselves into the moment and really sit and be. And so as I was contemplating what I was going to talk to you guys today about, this struck me as really relevant when you're in times of transition, because so often it's easy to look backwards and ask all the questions and make all the assumptions about what was. You have so many unknowns as you look forward. But there's something about this time of transition that can be really powerful and unlock a lot of these, unlock a lot of opportunities that might be lurking in the shadows. So that's where I want to focus our conversation today. What do you guys think? Excellent. So when we think about times of transitions and how you're going to approach them, it's easy to, like I mentioned a moment ago, to preoccupy your thoughts with what was and really get overwhelmed by what might be. So what we're going to do is, as I mentioned, is we're going to focus on the present. So there's a quote at the top of your worksheet. The present moment can be a frightening place to dwell, because therein lies the responsibility to choose what we think and feel and arrange our lives the way we want them to be. Let me sit with that for a minute. The present moment can be a frightening place to dwell, because therein lies the responsibility to choose what we think and feel and arrange our lives the way we want them to be. What comes to mind for you in reading that?
My first thought is a way to dissipate the adjective frightening. And how I would accomplish that would be to say to myself, if I take care of this moment, then I take care of all time.
Yeah. Oh, I like how you said that. Yeah. So the importance of tending to the present, and everything around it has a way of...
It has several different interpretations. It's also a reminder to live fully in the present. If I take care of this moment, I'm here, I'm present, my mind is where my feet are, and if I do that this moment, and then the next moment or minute or hour or the next day, then I will have had a successful life, successful being defined in many different ways, of course.
Absolutely. Lovely.
That we have a choice
We have a choice.
in the way we think and feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but during some of my times of transitions, you can sometimes feel like you don't have the choices.
Right.
Because you have to make an immediate decision, and it's just you're so overwhelmed, you're bombarded. So I like that, owning the choice. What else comes to mind?
There's a slight, I heard it from some of the people when they introduced, there's a kind of, sometimes the options seem a little bit kind of limitless.
Yeah.
And you talk about the responsibility to choose what we think and feel. Sometimes there's so many things, so many opportunities,
Yeah.
that actually trying to narrow in is sometimes quite difficult, and keeping your mind quiet while you're doing that.
Right.
I read an interview with Lin-Manuel Miranda
Mhm.
Hamilton, and he described his mind as always having lots of apps open. That's how he described it, that he just jumps about a lot, and he has to teach himself to close the apps down and focus on what's important at that moment, and that's where he's able to be creative. And that, so I just always thought that was quite an interesting
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of my desktop, right? Like we've got all kinds of things, and it can be limitless. But it's only limitless if we really don't have an understanding of what we need and aren't grounded in the present moment, right? I think when we have a sense of understanding what it is that we want and need and who we are, those limitless possibilities start to fade into the background, and you start to see what is most relevant for you. Excellent. Any other thoughts before we move on?
It just reminds me of the book The Power of Now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he mentions there, or maybe it's not from the book itself, but when they're talking about the fact that if we live in the past, we can get depressed. If we live in the future, we can get anxious.
Yeah.
So living in the now gives us the power to be calm,
Yeah.
to be content. Right? So
Easier
it's
said
just-
than done, right?
Of course. Of course.
Yeah. So we're going to take a perspective very much like that. You know, when we live in the past and are focused, overly preoccupied with what was, we tend to have we narrow our focus. Likewise, in the future, if we're looking at the opposite ends, what has happened, what might happen, we start to narrow our perspective, and we limit our ability to see all those possibilities and really understand which ones we need to prioritize for ourselves. So we're going to talk about 5 shifts that you can make all from truly a perspective of how a coach might approach it, to widen your perspective, to open up that. And you can do that by sitting in this idea of now and embracing your transition and all that it has to offer. Excellent. You ready for shift number 1? Okay, so the first thing that we can do to narrow a perspective, or for move from a narrow perspective to a wider perspective, is shift from seeking answers to asking questions. Point number 1. Coaches like to ask questions. We're very good at answering questions with questions. How many of you have been around 4-year-olds at some point in your lifetime? I happen to have a 3-year-old son right now. He's my middle, and he is fascinated by all things construction. We see a concrete truck, we have to go look at the concrete truck. Well, a couple weeks ago we were on a walk, and our neighbor was having a tree taken down a couple of doors down. Well, we didn't make it past that tree crew because we got there and I could see Jacob's mind just turning, like it was just going, and he was looking at everything that was going on. And there started the series of why questions. Why is he in the tree? Why is he taking that tree down? Why are they putting the trees in that big truck? Why? And in that moment, I paused. I stood there and I watched the tree crew with him. And I was enamored as he was. But so often I have just zipped by tree crews. I mean, there are a dime a dozen in this area. You see them everywhere. And I zipped by thinking, I know the answer, right? I hurry by, I know what they're doing, I know why they're doing it, and I never stopped to really look at what was happening and ask questions. When we shift from a narrow perspective of seeking answers to asking the questions, and if we approach it from a childlike curiosity with the why am I feeling this way? Why am I looking for something different? Why am I wanting to get rid of the old? We have the potential to just start to see our perspective open up in a way that we're going to just start to see all those limitless possibilities. You know, we as adults, we don't appreciate curiosity, and we are trained to rush by those tree crews. You know, we hurry by, one transition ends, and we're just like, okay, on to the next. But when we stop and ask these why questions, we're going to start to see those new perspectives. So there's space on there for you to contemplate some questions, but what have you been moving past at a hurried pace because you think you have the answers? Stop and look at your tree and ask why. What's coming up for you?
Usually fear is involved for me,
Fear?
living in fear.
Mm-hmm.
Could
Why?
be fear of losing what I think I have, or not getting what I think I want.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got a futuristic aspect to it.
Mm-hmm. Why are you afraid of what might be? Where is that fear coming from?
Well, I think basically all the emotions can be distilled to two emotions,
Yeah.
fear and love.
Okay.
So it could be fear manifested in a milder form, might be awkwardness, being people who are socially awkward in a situation, for instance, or shy, or I know there's a big tendency these days, especially in the therapeutic circles, talk about and ask if someone's an introvert versus an extrovert. That sort of way of how since we're all different, we have the same emotions, but different ways of processing it.
Absolutely. What other why questions are coming up for you? Yes, sir.
I think I've thought about this for a bit. I mean, in making a transition, and you say, not dwelling on the past and not, focusing on the future, there's a part there in a transition where you have to let go of the past. And one of the questions is, why is it so hard to let go of the past? And I mean, absolutely to let go of it so you're not thinking about not being part of it anymore. How do you transition from that? I mean, I must say, I'm still on my emails from my law firm and everything. I still get calls of people asking me, well, what happened in this transaction? What happened in that one? You were in charge of it. You know all this stuff. And I go, I'm happy to help because I'm a team player, but I'm also going, for various reasons, I have trouble letting go of it because there are international groups and groups outside my firm that I used to go to all the time and would speak at and do things. And it's very hard to let go of all that.
I can really share that experience with you. I was at my previous employer for 25 years, and I'd agreed to stay on an email thing to help some of my old students out with their university applications. So I asked them to keep me on it until I think Christmas. And then one day I was in the habit of looking at it, and then one day I tried to log on and I couldn't. And I thought, great. I had this moment where I smiled to myself. That's it, done now. That's all I needed to have, that feeling of just kind of having that separation. It helped that I came across the Atlantic Ocean as well, obviously, so I was just around the corner from it. But
nothing like an ocean.
no, that's right. but it was a really liberating experience, actually. That's it. That's kind of, that I totally understand where you're coming from, because you do sort of. And funnily enough, last weekend, the school that I worked in visited DC. For a sort of history politics trip, and a few of them came over and I met up with some of them for a meal one night, and it felt like it was in my past, which took me a while. Did take me a while. It took me probably till, I guess, kind of Christmas to kind of look at that as being in the past. But I've also noticed how much more productive I've been since I've kind of sort of, that separation sort of feels like it's been made now. But yeah, I totally understand that feeling. Yeah.
So we have to understand why we're holding on, and then recognize when you let go, it opens it up.
Yeah.
So you can see and do things that had been preoccupying your time.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing.
No, the fun thing is that those endings, even if you want them, they're very difficult.
Yeah.
I always remember my father decided to stop working. He didn't officially retire. He stopped working at 55, and he drove my mom crazy in the house because he needed to suddenly create an office space for himself and do all kinds of things because nobody calls him anymore. Nobody needs him in meetings. So I think that it's fun, even when we want these transitions. It's hard sometimes to let go of the past.
Absolutely. I heard recently, when something ends, you have to mourn it, whether it's good or bad. But when something is happening and the transition's beginning, you have to let go. There's something there.
Right. I went through the why question recently with why am I not motivated to look for a job?
That's a good one. What came up for you?
And a couple of things that came up for me, but one of them was that I probably don't want to jump into a very similar role like I did before. So I want to take the time to figure out what I really want to do. I know that I want to stay in the industry. I want to do that. I know that I want to lead the organizations, but over the past 2 months when I went through this process, I realized that what I did like and what I didn't like in my last role, and it made it much more clear to me what type of role I want to take next. And another thing that came out for me is that I really enjoy the downtime.
Yeah.
I was working crazy hours, traveling nonstop, and being in the now and being at home. I really enjoy that. So yeah, it's hard to jump to the next crazy job.
And I guess another question I think I've had is, why don't I want to do that anymore?
Why don't you
Why
want to do
Yeah.
don't I
Yeah.
want to do what I did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, why do I want to do something different? What is it? Why don't I want to do that anymore?
Exactly.
Because I kind of know that I don't want to do that anymore, but I don't know if I need to answer that question, or whether I just need to acknowledge that question that is there,
Yeah.
and kind of let it stew for a bit and let it just work itself out over time.
You bring up a great point, and that will be shift number 2. But we don't have to have answers to our why questions, right? So letting it stew. Yeah.
The flip side of yours is, why don't I know or have any ideas of what I would like to do instead?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's a scary question.
I can't progress without having a goal and direction. And I mean, maybe it's a combination. Like you said, I'm kind of enjoying the downtime. I've worked, working in big law, and this is the thing I'm finding everywhere. Being a lawyer has its own culture, its own, and I'm not talking about the small law firms or the small, sole practitioner. Big law, and especially when you started when I did, it was really, you had no life. And if you wanted to succeed, you had to work hard, you had to be smart, you had to have, be lucky enough to be assigned to do the kind of work that you ended up enjoying doing. And I was lucky in that way. And I parlayed that into a very successful career. But I gave up a lot. You're there 24/7 for your clients. When you're a young associate, you're there 24/7 at the beck and call of senior associates and partners. And I spent most of my career working in New York. So add that to it. Just saying, it's letting go of that was kind of a relief, but it was also define what your life was, because there wasn't anything outside.
In that environment, it's not only the lawyers who work those type of perfectionistic hours, the support staff does too. As a legal secretary, I was asked to walk through 2 blizzards to get to work, walk over a mile. They knew typically I would walk to and from work, but during the 2010 blizzard, I was expected to walk through the blizzard. I say walk through it because there were no cabs,
Remember that one? Yeah.
no public transportation, including the subway and the bus system.
And the sidewalks were covered. Yeah.
And I was told that was part of my job. I was on the emergency team.
Yeah.
And this was when I was working for one of the 10 largest law firms in the city.
Yeah. So often when we leave something, it leaves a huge gap, right? And so the why question of what do you want to do to fill that becomes a pretty important one.
My only question is like I've gone through the process of figuring out like what I like doing and the work that I've done and what I'm good at and where my heart is. And my why is like, why do I think I don't have the drive to like go do the extra work that I need to do to go to that next step?
Yeah.
So it's like there's certain, I'm like I should be reading certain books or doing certain sessions or having certain. Well, yes, but those are the things to do to get to that next step.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why am I not motivated to do them? Like, do I really want to? Do I really enjoy it that much? And so I kind of go through those why questions. Maybe part of it is looking forward. It's like, am I going to have the drive to then be successful and make the money that I need to make to have the retirement that I want and be able to travel and and all that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my why.
Yeah, that's good because you're asking, do you have what it takes, what you want to give to get to that? What do you think, that picture of the future?
I find it helpful to take a sentence that starts with the word why and change it to the word why to how.
Mm-hmm.
An example is, why am I not motivated to look for a new job? Might be better phrased, how can I get more motivated? Living more in the solution rather than living in the current muck and mire. And actually, when I examined questions that start with the word why, most of them are not emotionally or spiritual or helpful.
Yeah.
Nobody asks, why did I win the lottery? Why did I win the lottery? Why did something fabulous happen to me?
Yeah.
How did I personally get a job working and doing some very responsible work in what turned out to be the largest criminal trial in D.C. with only a high school education from one of the worst public high schools in the country, and I landed this paralegal position.
You bring up a great point. There's a difference between how and why. Why, though, grounds us to the present moment. It helps us explore things in a way that doesn't ground us or move us too much to the future. There's a place to sit in transition, and there's a place to sit with why. Once you have answers to your why questions, then you can shift them to how and turn them into action and turn them into those forward-moving momentum that you need to take you into the future, take you to the transition. I do want to move on to the next shift that we need to. Is there any other thoughts before we do that, though? Yeah, please, Jackie.
Your sign reminds me of the book. It's the book of affirmation, where it's kind of gets something similar to what you're doing, where you're shifting. Like, certain questions you need to really think about asking before moving forward in a step.
Yeah.
And I like it because it's better than doing affirmations. Because it really focuses on how and how you want to get this done. So this reminds me a bit of that assignment. But it seems like even with that, you still need maybe like a coach or something to kind of help you and guide you.
Yeah, so there's a couple of other shifts that we'll start to see how we build on them. There is a place for action, right? You can't sit in transition. You can't sit in the messiness of now. You have to move forward. Yeah, so we'll build on that. But you have to start with knowing what you want. Why are you here? Why are you looking for something different? Why do you want to hold on or let go of the past? And until you know that, you can't really go in the direction that goes back to that quote. You can't arrange your life the way you want it to be unless you know what your why questions are.
What I find is that sitting with the why also helps me, at least, finding conflicting commitments.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's part of the process.
Yeah. It helps in a lot of ways. So shift number one. Okay.
Quick question?
Yes.
I'm looking at the sentence here, or the question here. What do you have?
We're going to get to that one next.
Okay.
Let me. Yeah. So shift number one is shifting from seeking answers to asking questions. So Sashi was noticing the next question, and that comes with shift number 2. Who here remembers the sitcom series Friends? Yeah, so if you're not familiar with it, my apologies, but there's this one episode, the one with the secret closet. If you're remembering it, Chandler becomes obsessed with unlocking one closet in Monica's apartment that had always been locked. It was never opened, and when he thought about it, he never saw her get into it. He had no idea what was in this closet. And he became obsessed throughout this particular episode about unlocking the closet. Well, he finally got it unlocked, and Monica walks in about the moment he takes the door off and realizes that she has a junk closet, and she is absolutely mortified. And in this, yeah, come on in, have a seat.
Couple more people.
Come on in, come on in.
Oh, thank you.
So in this, we'll give you guys a second to get situated. There's a couple of handouts, so make sure you get one of those. And we're just talking about shifts that you can make to approach your transition from a coach's mindset. So Monica's walking in, she sees that Chandler has discovered her junk closet, and she's absolutely mortified. And her justification for this was, well, these are all of the things that don't fit neatly into any other category. So she has a perfectly organized apartment. If you don't know Monica Geller, she's a perfectionist. And she put all of the things that do not fit into this closet and locked it away. And sometimes we're a little bit like that, right? When we are working through transitions and we don't have all of the answers, or if we have something that doesn't fit neatly into what we think we should do, or a category that we have, we tend to lock it away and just not give it the time and attention it needs. You know, when we're desperate, like we have this habit to make everything look nice. We have to justify, we have this tendency to justify our past, to justify what we want for our future. But in times of transition, there's some real value with sitting in the messy and sitting in the now and helping to being, have a little bit of a junk closet and being willing to embrace it. We don't have answers for everything in times of transition. So that question you pointed out is, what have you locked away during this time of transition because it doesn't fit neatly into another category?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah. What have you locked away? What have you put in your closet because it doesn't fit neatly into any other area?
You mean like in terms of like our professional, like our interest in that? Yeah, I mean for me it's more my learning of languages and travel and the international aspect of my education and my interests.
Yeah.
Doesn't fit into everything else.
Exactly.
I do. Yeah.
That's a good example. And it can be, to your point, it can be talents, passions, goals, anything that you have not properly just given attention to because it doesn't fit what you think your future should be. Yeah.
This is a really silly one, I think, but I'm going
Nothing
to tell you
silly.
anyway. So I'm a keen golfer, and when I left the UK last summer, I left my golf clubs in the UK because I'm going to go back this summer and play with some friends. I thought, rather than that, and I also thought I'd treat myself to a new set when I got here, but I haven't done it, so I haven't played a game of golf in 7 or 8 months. And I don't know why that is, and I've not been under any great urgency or rush to do it. It's not like there aren't opportunities to do it. I just haven't.
But there's something there.
Yeah,
You've locked your golf clubs away.
I have. Well, I haven't got any to lock away at the moment. I also haven't got them out to lock them. Yeah, no, that's right. And I think maybe because I probably feel guilty, but I think I'm not probably using my time very constructively. That's what I do.
But there's a place for passions inside transitions, right?
Yeah.
And so often because we think that they're not, because we have to be productive, you don't invest time in things that maybe bring you joy. And taking it one step farther, who knows what you'll discover on the golf course, right? Insights
Probably
come
water. Probably water.
Yes.
The stuff that I do for my religious community, which goes across a lot of different things in terms of fundraising and collecting money and helping the community. It's good stuff, and I've been doing a lot more since I've been out of work, but I'm not quite sure how to articulate that.
Okay.
Because I want to show that I'm doing something while I'm not working.
Right. Right. So the question becomes, how can you then use that and prepare it for the future? Right? Yeah. Absolutely. What else comes up for you with this idea of sitting with messy, sitting with the unknown, and our tendency to make everything look nice?
I think that's just the way the nature of life is. Nothing's ever going to be finished. It's all basically a process. Any endeavor, any activity or project or hobby I pursue is just a process and never really gets finished until the very end of life, physical life.
I think it can be very helpful, maybe Michael, like you said, I don't know what I want to do. So it may be very helpful to sit down for a second and think about things that are talents or hobbies, and it may bring us to the next step of, oh, maybe I can do this. Or maybe my skills can be transitioned to, or transferred, sorry, to a different type of job.
Well, that's a good point. I was just thinking about it. I do have something, and I'll share it with everyone. And it's something that I actually tried to do 10, 15 years ago without quitting my day job. But I had a side venture going on because the stars aligned and things came in. And I think, just to answer the question why I blocked it up, is because I feel like I lost the opportunity when I gave it up. And I'm saving the suspense. When I gave it up, when I gave it up, and I don't know how to get back into it now. But I was trying, and I had 3 potential projects to produce on Broadway or off Broadway 3 plays. I got as far on one as doing a table reading with some of the best Broadway stars. My next step was going to have to be going out and raising money from investors. But again, a lot of it had to do with the fact that these opportunities were from the authors I knew personally. They had been produced before, and I saw that there was a lack of it on Broadway, and I had a lot of friends in the theater business. But it's a full-time job, and I needed a partner to really do it who had the experience on everything. And things end up, for one reason or another, they just never went through. But, I was flying out to LA to have meetings, and there's actually going to be coming to Broadway a show called Tick, Tick, Boom, which was the predecessor to Rent. And a friend of mine was developing it out in LA, and I mean this must be 12 years ago, doing a production that we went out to go see, and now it's finally going to be done because no one's really ever seen it. It was written, and when Jonathan Larson died, it was right before Rent. It was one of those things that we focused on that. But what I'm saying is I've locked this away because I don't know how to get started back in it again. And I don't know if I'd have those opportunities to go back and revisit, because you still have to get the rights to do the play.
Yeah.
And it's, to me, it uses a lot of skills I had because it's like a project. And doing transactions in a law firm and working with a team, it's a project.
It sounds like there's a lot there for you to explore.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's how to get back into it, because it's been so long. It was something that really demanded my full time, and I didn't have the proper partners that I could rely upon to do it right.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for sharing.
anyway, but when you say locked away, I realize I've done that, and when everything just kind of fell apart, I just,
You just
you know,
put it in.
well, I had to go back to doing my day job
Right.
anyway, so.
But that's an excellent example. We often just put things aside. We don't give it much thought, or the demands and the reality of the current situation don't warrant the time and attention that it requires. We just set it aside and then we forget about it. And this is a great opportunity as you sit in transition to go back to those kinds of things and explore them and see how they might fit into what it is that you're looking for your future. Especially for those of you that are looking to step away from what you have done and into something entirely new. So the second shift you can make is resist the urge to make things look nice and allow room for your discomfort. Give yourself the opportunity to sit with the discomfort of not having a place for all of the things that you have locked away in your junk closet. Shift number 3. So this is Ernest Hemingway quote that I like to go back to a lot. I teach a lot of communications training sessions. Come on. When people talk, listen completely. Most people never listen. What's listening have to do with your transition?
I think the most important part is hearing subtle clues or subtleties in what they're saying to determine what the actual meaning is. Oftentimes, people say something one way, but the undertones are different, and there's something you can find in that undertone.
Yeah. And the same applies, this Hemingway quote is very much about communications with people. But I think that it can be translated to the conversations that we have with ourselves, too. And to your point, there's subtlety in all the conversations we have with ourselves. When we ask our why questions and we're seeking these things we've locked away, what is it that we're saying that we're not really listening to? Worksheet. So, what have you, we have this tendency to force answers. We have a tendency, because we want things to look nice, because we are trained and we have this habit of just seeking answers. When we get to this stage, moving from what you think you know, like we think we have to know the answers. But when we stop and sit back and really listen to what is coming up for us, it gives us the opportunity to realize that the answers are going to come in time, right? We don't have all of the answers in this time, but they're going to come through the time of transition and maybe beyond. So what's coming up for you there? Where have you forced answers where there are none?
Say again?
Where have you forced answers where there are none?
Generally,
When I force an answer, it's because I'm coming up against a deadline, and it's sort of imposed on me as opposed to one that is self-determined.
Yeah. And transitions are can feel a little bit like a deadline, right?
Yeah.
So you force answers.
Your situation,
Mhm.
got to pay bills,
Yeah.
reality, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You say, what if you force answers there are none? Well, then you might have to look for a different kind of question.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if there are no answers,
If there are no answers.
then, you know, there's nowhere to go.
Mhm.
So you need a different kind of question, maybe.
Yeah. So when you realize you might be trying to force an answer where there is no question, ask a different question, right? Right? What questions are open for you right now? What have you asked? Think about the why questions we started with. And we alluded to, there's not always an answer.
Maybe it's important to know which direction to go in, or have an idea of how far to the right I want to be versus move how far to the right versus how far to the left.
I've had to really resist, I think, a sense of, because I'm in this diplomatic community, it would be really easy for me to get a job at the British Embassy. I've been offered several. I don't want to do them. One reason I don't want to do them is I'll probably end up working for my wife, which I don't think is a good thing. But it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Because I didn't come over here to be involved in I was in a little bubble at home. I wanted to get away from being in a bubble, and I could just see myself. And I suppose I've asked myself the question: why don't I want to do this? And it just comes down to a gut feeling. It just doesn't feel right. And I see people I came over with, and people at the same time who I've made friends with, are all going in. And I think, is there something wrong with me? Why don't I want to go and do this? And I've wrestled with that in the last 2 or 3 weeks actually. But I think I know why I don't want to do it, and that's because I think I've got a great opportunity, and I think I'll be closing that off. But it is a difficult. Like, why can't I just go and get a job?
Right.
Why can't I just go and do something?
Because it makes it look nice to just follow it.
Right. And everything, and all those questions, all those things that are floating around. I guess you think, oh, they'll all be nailed down. I won't have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
But actually, I don't think there will be.
Yeah.
I think there'll just be a sense of unfulfilled possibility.
Yeah, that's a lovely example, because that's when we're not willing to listen to that gut, wherever your gut shows up. If we're not willing to listen to it and have that nuanced conversation with ourselves, we might be rushing into an opportunity that is not for us, that isn't for you at this time, and it won't bring you that fulfilling sense of accomplishment that you're looking for on the other end of your transition. So listening to your gut and being willing to sit with the discomfort of not knowing you have an answer, and trusting the answer will come in time. So shift number 3, moving from thinking you have to know the answers to realizing that the answers will occur through the course of your transition. Okay. Shifts number 4 and 5. So these last 2 shifts go hand in hand. We make swift, quick judgments, and that leads to natural exclusions of ideas. We judge, and we tend to, in that judgment, we limit ourselves and the possibilities that might be. When we approach these situations, assumptions can be dangerous. They tell a story about what we think we know is true, and then we just apply that story to everything that we see around us. And when you're pulling from your past experience and you're applying that judgment to the future, you're missing a whole host of opportunities inside this transition. You limit your ability to see the positive regard around you. Judgment is a human gift. Like, we are designed to make swift judgments. It's part of our DNA. It's part of how we were made. And there's a time and place for judgment. Okay, so I'd be a little bit naive to say that don't ever use judgment in this time of transition. There's a place for it. But it's the unchecked judgment. It's those things that you let go unchecked and unquestioned that can lead you into, it can be dangerous for you in times of transition. So what judgments do you have that might be unchecked? What assumptions are you applying to your transition that you haven't really checked in with and asked a why question? Anybody want to share? That's kind of a big one.
I'm not sure if this is where you're going, but like for me, it's like that I wouldn't have the money to go fully back to school and get the education that I need, like
Yes. That's
to
exactly.
then go where I need to go,
Yeah.
or where I may want to go.
Right. You're just placing that assumption on
Right.
dollars and cents.
Right. So if I do like the quick certification programs, I can make some money, but then it also goes back to money eventually.
Right.
But yeah, I'm assuming that I couldn't do a bigger program.
Right.
One, because I don't want to go back to school. I can't imagine going back to school. But this has made me think
But
maybe
that's
actually.
another judgment, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
you have feelings and thoughts and all these things about going back to school. So you exploring those and being willing to check in with those. Yeah.
I've made the judgment, and I'm not the only one of my colleagues who are in the same position that I am from my firm, that we're too old and they don't want to hire us.
Yes.
And particularly someone who is an internationally known expert or has the qualifications, they don't want to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
They want someone younger. I mean, for example, I got approached through LinkedIn for a perfect job for me. Actually, it's like one level down, but doing exactly what I've been doing, but in-house, and a leasing company. I'd have to move to Ireland, which I don't mind. I go there every year for meetings and things like that. But it was a very detailed job description, and it said the candidate must have no more than 7 years experience in a law firm or a leasing company. Even though I would be kind of assistant general counsel, I kind of think they're looking for people in that category.
Yeah.
I applied, I sent in an email with my CV as requested. I haven't heard back from them. And I want to follow up, but I also realize, it's my judgment is, they would, there's several reasons. One is they do want somebody younger. But also they'll look at me, would I be happy in this position because of my qualifications?
And will you be willing to take what they're going to pay
Yeah.
for somebody less than 7 years? That's the valid judgment, right? That is something that is very real as you approach transitions. But checking in with that and being willing to explore the positive regard in that scenario and finding the opportunity where you can rewrite the narrative. They don't want me because I'm too experienced, and how do you flip that and share with them what you have to offer as a result. So finding and checking in with those judgments is a huge part of approaching your transition with a coach's mindset, and being willing not to take them for face value. And in some cases, those judgments will be valid. Like in that particular case, when they put on the job description no more than 7 years, that one's been affirmed, right? But it doesn't apply to all of the landscape.
All of the landscape could be, part of all of the landscape could be the candidate stating that she or he would be willing to work at a less stressful, perhaps less
Yeah.
prestigious environment, going from what I was in, the 10th largest law firm in the city at the time,
Yeah.
to working for the ABA,
Yeah.
which is nonprofit,
Yep.
less stress, and to emphasize the less stressful element of it.
Yeah. So there's real practical ways to take those judgments and shift them and apply them to how do you position yourself to give you the opportunity to share that positive regard and look for those opportunities. But we can explore those too. Yeah.
I know a guy who was the CEO and owned his own company,
Yeah.
and he went literally on a job interview for an administrative assistant
Yeah.
position, and he was asked, well, why are you here, essentially?
Yeah.
He said, this is exactly the job that I'm looking for. I'm looking for this right now.
You got
He
it.
was hired, and he said on the interview, he said, wow, none of us can commit definitively to
Yeah.
working here. He said, I envision myself being here for 5 years or longer.
Yeah.
And
That's great.
he's
he's
now
there?
he's there 7 years.
That's fantastic. What a great story. Yes, sir.
That story actually maybe had some of what I was going to ask you.
Uh-huh.
So, if you find an opportunity that interests you,
Mhm.
it's in a field that interests you. Maybe it's a field you've been in. Maybe it's one you're transitioning to. The pay or the management responsibility or the responsibilities overall or whatever the level, the title, whatever it is, it's dropped down from where you were before,
Yeah.
from what your resume is going to show. So this basic conundrum, right? So do you have any quick tips about how to convey your sincerity
Yeah.
that this is not a lark, this is not a joke, that
That
you
you're
actually
back.
want to
Yeah.
apply for this job, and without giving off the impression that you're not going to put your all into it or something like that.
There's some really practical ideas that I have for that, but I am noticing the time. So
Okay,
let's-
yeah, sure.
let me get to through the next
Yep.
shift, and we can absolutely come back to that, Rob.
Yep.
Yeah, because there's some very practical things that we can do. Yeah. So the idea of there we go. Letting go of your judgments, checking in with your judgments to make sure that you're looking for the positive regard in the opportunities, that you're not applying that broad brush. When we judge, we exclude possibilities that might be, right? And when you're excluding that, you're naturally limiting your opportunities. So when we think about what it means to approach a transition from a coach's mindset, the fifth shift is to seek the possibilities and be willing to explore all of the possibilities and be careful to limit them with your judgments. So shift 4, set aside your judgment and seek the unconditional positive regard. And shift number 5, shift from the tendency to exclude ideas to the habit of including all possibilities. So, we have now explored 5 ways that you can explore or to approach your transition from a coach's mindset. What's coming up for you as we near the end of our time together?
I think one factor, all of these, I think, are very good, ways to approach, transition, and, I understand the coaching aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But what the coaching, and it's still hard personal, what the coaching can't do is tell you what to seek,
Yeah.
what to go after, and then tailor your skills
Yeah.
to fit that opportunity. I can't go apply for a job with the resume I have right now. My resume is a perfect resume, not to quote somebody, but I can't send it out to I don't know where because I haven't picked where.
Right. And you bring up a very valid point. The things that we have talked about are the things that come from inside us. It's our mindset. It's how we're going to approach it. And once we have shifted in one or more of these areas, we can then look at the practical and the tangible things that we need to start to do to get us to what we know we want, when we know how we want to arrange our life. So you're going to start to see how you need to rearrange your skills and repackage your skills to put them in that new resume. You're going to know how you're going to articulate the transition and why you're looking for something different. Because what you will have done for yourself is you will have given yourself the inner confidence to know completely what it is that you're going to step out into the world and ask for. So when you start with the coach's mindset, the practical, the reality of what you need to do, the how you get there will start to come into light. And that's when you work with organizations like this and use the tools and resources at your disposal to help you bring that to light. But when you start from this perspective, it comes from within and you can step into the world confidently and ask in a way that maybe you haven't been able to before. So, yes.
I think another thing that comes through is time as well. That this is not something that's going to happen in a moment.
Great.
And that it's something that, that transition might not be very neat. It might not be going from one thing you really like to another thing you really like. It might go via something you don't really like or you kind of have to do or, because needs must, that there's something needs doing. But certainly one thing that I've been lucky to have is time and not much pressure.
Yeah.
Which is I know I'm very, very fortunate to have that. But it also, it's not jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, which is a very easy mistake to make.
Absolutely. And in that, I think it's okay to acknowledge that there might be a couple of intermittent steps before you get, and Barbara, Brenda, you mentioned that, you kind of know where you're going, but you need to sit here right now. Part of this approaching it with a coach's mindset is being willing to take those small incremental steps, sit with something, continue to ask yourself the questions, continue to set aside your judgments, and then allow the next thing to reveal itself in time, right?
Also, as you ask the questions, look at your judgments come out just like Jamil said, going with your gut. As you read things again, you realize, I've talked to this person or people about this topic, and I found this is really where I want to go.
Yeah.
Finally comes to me. It sounds good on paper, but it isn't really good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Follow that gut, and your gut, your gut is worth acknowledging and spending time with. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, I'd like to address it from the company point of view.
Yes.
Okay? I was a headhunter, an employment manager for a number of companies, about 35 years in the employment field. And I interviewed a lot of people in my lifetime. Obviously, I was impressed with people that had gone through this process, that were changing their goals and directions, but I wanted to know how sincere that person was. Was this really going to be the right change? One example would be the salary question, okay? Now, if you came in for an interview for a position and the salary was less than what you had been earning, I really had to understand if you were going to accept that. Psychologically, people, evaluate themselves on many factors, but salary being one of them. This is what I'm worth, okay? So even if you're making a transition somewhat into another area, your expectation of your worth is still going to be at a certain level. So But people have, I mean, obviously you can, to learn new things, you take a step down if that's the new challenge you want. I mean, and that's great because it's a whole renewed interest in moving your professional life forward.
Yeah.
But you have to be cognizant of how the company is going to be looking at all of this transition. So you really have to be prepared to show why and how much thought you put into it and why you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more, Tom. I've spent lots of time inside organizations, and HR professionals, recruiters, we're not really good at checking in with our assumptions. We apply broad assumptions to the candidates we see because there's lots of quick decisions.
Right.
So when you do get in the door, and Rob, we can revisit that question in just a moment, it's about being able to articulate your story. And to the point of approaching your transition with a coach's mindset, when you take the time to sit with it, to what I said a moment ago, I think it helps you solidify that sincerity and allows you to articulate what it is that you're looking for and the real reason why. And hopefully that will, with the right work, I think it lands for employers better going, oh no, they've really thought about this in a way that isn't just jumping ship. And then that allows you to build trust with that potential employer.
New challenge is always the best way to move your career forward. I mean, if you wake up in the morning and you're not being challenged, you should be looking for another opportunity.
That's when we start to have low engagement.
Right, exactly. It's very important. And at any age,
Absolutely.
This idea of ageism sometimes is, we've discussed it, heard a little bit about it, it's a block people use. But if you are sincere, if you have a lot to offer somebody and it's the right position for you and the right company, go for it.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And now we need to get employers on the side of going, there's so much to offer. And they want, the 40 plus group, you're looking and want different things and you need different things from what your experience. So we're bringing the things together slowly. I want to come back to Rob's question, but I don't want to take it any more time than I'm allotted.
No, still have a few more minutes.
Okay, so the practical piece of taking what we have and applying it. Your question, as I remember it, correct me or add to it, but what can you do to get in the door if you're reconfiguring your experience and looking for something else, right? Look at your resume first and foremost. The traditional resume approach is very chronological in nature. Break out some of that, give some white space to your skills. So, and at the very top, so I wish I had an example, but if you think about 2 columns on a page, devote some time to that top left corner to the skills that you bring, right? What are the things that you have that are specific to what you're looking to get from the employer? I use the rest of that left column on my resume for my education, the things I want people to glance at. These people have very little time to process a resume, so what's that stuff on the left? And then organize your experience. There's a couple ways to do that. You can do it chronologically in that traditional fashion, but hit the things that are relevant to what you're looking for and what you want to get. We don't need to know everything, especially if it's not transferable. Speak to that concept of transferable skills, right? The second place I think that you start to write the story is on your cover letter. And this is where your transition and your sincerity really starts to shine through. I am looking for, I'm making this transition. I enjoyed this time, but looking forward to the challenge. And here's what my experience can bring you. And if they're asking for salary requirements, then that's the opportunity if you want in that space to tell them what you are or are not looking for, or what you're, help them fill in the story for you. Don't let them write the story for you. But I think the most powerful thing that you can do is continue to network and make the connections in the community that you want to get to. So they know you before they see your resume, and they already go, you know what? He's going to bring a lot to our organization. here's why we need to look at this differently and from a different perspective.
The last one is the one that I suspected is ultimately going to be the answer, or not the answer, but one of the better answers, as it is with so many aspects. So
Yeah.
in this particular case, it's to overcome this, what the right word is, but perhaps apparent mismatch from aspects of your resume
Right.
to the job you're applying, which you can, as you said, work on in advance and reshape it, but that the ability to have met somebody through networking that he is involved at that company with that job is probably going to be to best overcome that and show them the sincerity of what you're
Exactly,
trying to do.
right. So they connect with you, the human, and not what they see on paper. When you know the person, it's a lot harder to make judgments about and write their story. We still do that, but it's harder than on paper. What other questions?
Yeah, well, just one phrase to cover that. The expression, past performance is the best indicator of future performance. In making transitions, if you've been successful in your positions in the past, that's a record of your performance. That's going to continue with your new positions in the future, because that's who you are.
Right.
You are successful at what you do.
Right. So then packaging that success in a way that the new situation is going to recognize it as such.
It's easier when you transition from one type of a job to a different type of job, but if, for example, you decide to take a lower level job, people start to ask why.
Why? Yeah.
And that's, I think, the most difficult answer to give.
Yeah. So that spend a lot of time with that why question. So when you're asked, it just flows naturally out of you. So it lands very sincerely with that whoever is receiving it. And then your resume becomes the place where you start that dialogue. Yeah. What else can I answer for you? Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to
Thank you.
be with you.
Very good. Thank you.